Okay, so now we're going to be looking at how to plot your story content. We're going to be looking at everything that we have learnt so far and bringing it all together to construct a story to deliver your ideal message, targeting the emotions that you want to achieve. Do you want them to remember data? And also, what data would you like them to take away? What emotion would you like it to drive within your audience? Do you want to create a dopamine effect using, for example, cliffhangers? Do you want to drive motivation through inspiration, empathy, mentorship, or even fear? Whichever path you choose, these 7 story structures will cater for most, if not all, of your needs. Christopher Booker is legendary in the art of storytelling. There are many others. However, we have derived our content specifically from his book and chosen this as a primary example to A, give you further reading if you would like to, and also to enable you to begin creating your own effective stories with immediate effect. These structures drive imagination as well as increase motivation and make people take instant action to derive change. We'll look at each in detail, and also I'll be giving you some examples. The first story structure that we're going to be looking at is overcoming the monster. Now, in his book, Christopher Booker detailed stories on how to build confidence in our own abilities and to keep strong when we encounter challenges or hold-ups in either our personal or our working lives. He goes into detail how a hero overcomes a threatening monster, a villain and dark force that threatens a homeland. Now, this particular type of story is used to arm your audience with belief in themselves, to motivate them to imagine themselves as the subject of the story and overcome challenges that they may be facing at that particular time. It's there to showcase perseverance and optimism. Now, if you look at the structure of the story itself, it's very similar to the superhero model, where you learn about the monster or the villain, you train for battle. However, you're defeated by the monster once it's revealed. Then you try and find a different approach to overcome whatever it is that's holding you back until you defeat that monster. Now, the monster or the villain is a metaphor. It doesn't need to be a person. It could be identified as a challenge that needs to be overcome. This could be anything. This could be COVID-19, financial markets. Maybe there's a new boss and your relationship with the new boss or their way of doing things isn't exactly in complete alignment with yours. Or maybe you've got an awkward colleague or an awkward customer and you want to find the best way to get the best results, working with them, for them, and to improve overall productivity. The best way to use this story is to think about your audience and the challenge that they may be facing. You need to find their villain. The villain is their challenge. And then paint the picture in detail using descriptions and also provide them with tested, actionable steps that they can easily implement. So what you're actually doing here is you're giving them a scenario similar to their own but not exactly the same, and showing them how it was overcome in the past and how it worked to produce a better future. So that's overcoming the monster. The next story structure we're going to be looking at is rags to riches. Now, in the book, this is where a modest and moral but downtrodden character achieves a happy ending when their natural talents are displayed to the world at large. Again, going back to Hollywood movies, we could look at A Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith. Now, in this movie, he was the downtrodden character with initial discontent. Then he had the requirement to change. He wanted to better himself. He was forced into a situation where he had to better himself and look after his son. They had minor struggles and small successes as they progressed along the way. He had his job. It was going well. He had targets and exams to overcome. But during that journey, he hit rock bottom. He had to overcome the crisis that was holding him back and that could have ruined all of his chances and everything he was working for. But he eventually succeeded. He won and he received the reward. A true rags to riches story is one that storytellers tell when they focus not just on how great their talent is, but on the lessons that they've learned along the way. These stories are best used to instill a sense of perseverance and continual growth to achieve better and to build a better world, both for yourself, your family, and also those around you. This story really emphasizes on finding your strengths and playing down your weakness, which is essential, especially when speaking to sales teams and trying to motivate them to build themselves to become ever stronger. The power from this story comes when people hear how you overcame the challenge. Since everyone has challenges in their life that they have to overcome, sometimes against all odds, they not only want to know how you overcame the challenge, but they also want to know what tools or tips they can pick up along the way to enable them to overcome the challenge and to give them the vision and drive to do so for themselves. Now, the quest story relates to something specific which is lost, missing, or desperately needed. As an individual, it's impossible to resolve and find a solution on one's own. The hero in this part of the story and his or her companions must overcome the obstacles and collaborate as a team to find that solution. The quest story is powerful as it provides clarity and focus and demonstrates that to achieve true greatness requires working together in camaraderie. When telling this type of story, it's important to detail the relationships and how team members work together and interact with each other to instill strength both in their teamwork, camaraderie, and also how they became friends as a result of it. The typical structure is when you receive a mission, but you have obstacles presented which seem unachievable working on one's own. But then combining skills, putting heads together, and utilizing everyone's strengths, that task becomes ever more manageable. The story that you tell has to display the teamwork and camaraderie that went into providing the final solution, which was far better than it was in the initial stages, and also the feeling of success working as a team was so much more important and also fulfilling when the team finally overcomes any obstacles and eventually wins the prize. The quest story structure illustrates the importance and satisfaction of achieving goals through teamwork. So it's essential in all forms of business leadership, team building, and also just to drive motivation when there is any change happening at any given time. The voyage and return structure, as described in the book, is a story of normal people who are suddenly thrust into strange and alien worlds and must make their way back to normal life. Now, these stories are metaphors for being out of one's own comfort zone. The voyage and return story illustrates overcoming and adapting to new experience, also developing self-growth, awareness, and empathy with others. The structure follows many parts. To begin with, living an unadventurous life. Now again, even this is a metaphor. Unadventurous here means not completely fulfilled. Suddenly, you're transported into a new world. Maybe you've changed team, maybe you've changed company, maybe there is just a change within the company that you're working in, and you have to adapt to this change to make everything work in the best possible way. The story goes on to how you explored new surroundings, but then felt uncomfortable and insecure. This happens to many of us when we change jobs or move home. We're thrown out of our comfort zone and we don't see how we can carry on in this direction because we're so used to the direction that we were going on before. We're confronted with darkness ahead and everything seems bleak. However, with a change in mindset, we realise that we can defeat the challenges and the change is actually pretty good. Taking everything into account, we realise that this new experience that we've been thrust into is actually helping us to develop as a person, and also it's enabling us to grow and succeed in ways that we might not have ever even contemplated in the past. This story essentially demonstrates that we are able to step out of our comfort zone in order to learn new things and embrace new challenges. Life is never easy, and we have to embrace it. And by telling people this story and giving them hope that whatever they're thrown into in the future, they will come through the other side. It's used to drive team motivation. It can be used with your personal interactions with friends and family too, especially with young ones. Perhaps they're starting a new school. You could use this story structure to say, hey, this is what happened to me in the past. You can construct your own story, which you can then deliver to them to show them that you did it, you overcame it, it was a massive change. And during this story process, they're going to relate to what you're saying to them and think, oh, okay, so it's not just me going through this. My mentor went through it before. So now comedy stories. How would we use comedy stories in business? Well, apart from just giving your crowd a bit of enjoyment and entertainment, they are actually fantastic for conflict resolution, often used by managers and also team members who are trying to resolve any sort of in-work office politics or conflict. Now, when there's a conflict, it's always a good idea to separate the person from the problem and to make it as light-hearted as possible. And that's where the comedy element comes in. So tell an amusing story in which things become increasingly complicated, tangled and confusing due to external complications. And this is how many conflicts always are. There's always a tangled mess of who did what and who said what and what happened when. And by just making more of a laughing matter about it, telling a story about a similar situation that happened to you in the past can help you to resolve conflicts between other people. Comedies, even the movies, often deal with the complexities of human relationships, and this is ever more apparent in the workplace. Hold out the hope that the simple truths can help to rectify any situation. So that'll make more sense when we actually go through the story structure itself. So to begin with, individuals don't see eye to eye. That's usually the general scenario with any conflict situation. Outside forces are separating them or driving them apart, which again is usually the situation that causes conflict. It might not necessarily just be the two people or teams of people that are having some degree of argument or dispute. It might not even be their fault. It could be external forces such as different departments that are actually causing the disturbance in the force. There's often confusion, uncertainty and frustration, obviously. And then that leads on to anger. So it's ideal to nip any form of conflict in the bud as soon as possible. When you're telling your story, make sure that you really do harp on about the point that everybody is entangled in an unresolvable conflict. And this happens all of the time. To each and every one of us, we've all been subject to some form of conflict in the past. And the way to resolve any conflict is to be open and have an open mind and discuss like normal, reasonable people. Now, it's hard to get people to do that, and this is why the story is so powerful, because you give an example of something that has happened in the past, a real-life situation where something similar to this exact situation has happened, and this is how it was resolved. But also by making it into a bit of a comedy, you're taking the onus, you're taking away the stress, and you're actually using the endorphins that we talked about earlier to make light heart of the actual problem itself. And even if it's only momentary, it will actually take the pressure away from the actual situation that's occurring. The best thing about this story is you can give a lovely happy ending to it as well. Not just getting the problem resolved, but how much better things were afterwards. And if you have access to both parties who are in this conflict, and you can tell them both the same story, even better, even if you have them both in the same room at the same time, it's ever more powerful. It shows the importance of communication and open-mindedness to resolve any and every conflict. So try it. Hopefully there won't be a need for you to, but if you do, it's very powerful, very effective. Now on to the tragedy story type. This is a feel-good, feel-better type of story. It's a classic cautionary tale in which we see the falling of the central character who chose the wrong path but learnt from the mistake that was made. That's the actual story in the book. However, a tragedy story also embraces the inevitable, one that illustrates that sometimes things are out of our control. A tragedy is most powerful and compelling when it builds and rebuilds motivation in people who've lost faith and pride and confidence in themselves due to something that has happened to them. So the story structure goes like this. A goal is set to be achieved. However, they set out on a path of destruction. Now either they make that destructive path themselves, or maybe it's just unavoidable. They are unable to control what happens. It might not be their fault. However, unavoidably, their fate is sealed. Then the story would just tell the plot unravelling to the expected eventuality of things going completely wrong. But the message that this story gives is that life does go on, and the main message is that we have to learn from mistakes of the past and do our best not to let them happen again. Everyone makes mistakes, and sometimes things are just out of our control. The main thing is that we learn from the mistakes of the past and we carry on. So telling a good story of something in a similar situation that has happened to you in the past can really make people feel better. It can help people to overcome stress, depression, and has many other uses also. Above all, it will get them motivated, especially in a workplace scenario. Now the 7th story structure is rebirth. This story instills the idea of overwhelming change always being an option. We can change our direction at any given time. Nothing is set in stone. There is always a way to make significant change if we really want to. Now, the story itself talked about a flawed character who faced a reckoning that forced them to change their ways and renew themselves and or those around them. The rebirth story's power comes from displaying that transformation can happen and we can be reborn to achieve future greatness in ourselves and those around us. It is utilised mainly in companies when teams need to take on drastic or tremendous change. The story structure goes like this. Perhaps at the moment we're going 2 steps forward and then 3 steps back. We keep doing this repeatedly. Now there's an old saying that if you keep repeating mistakes that you constantly make, it's a form of madness. However, at some point you do come to a point of awareness, and that is what the story needs to illustrate. At some point when you become aware that what you're doing is not working, that is the point of awareness, and that is the time the change needs to be implemented. Of course there's going to be transition difficulties. However, when those are overcome, you'll be reborn to continued and ongoing success. So your story, when you tell it, has to have each of these 6 elements in there. Talking about going 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, continuing to make mistakes and never progress, but then becoming aware at some point and thinking, oh my gosh, I have to make this change and I'm going to make it now. But then it was difficult. It was cumbersome, it could be tiresome, it could have been stressful, but that will be overcome. So this is when you're giving advice, counselling, coaching, maybe as a manager, a team leader, or even to colleagues, friends or family. The main message of the story is, it is never too late to make a change. So I'm sure you'll see there from those 7 story structures, there are many ways that you can utilise them yourself. Maybe you're even thinking, wow, I wish somebody had done that with me. I wish someone had told me their motivational story when I came up against one of these challenges, because I'm pretty sure that each of these stories could have been relevant to you at some point. You know, the rebirth, the motivation, the quest, the voyage, overcoming the monster. We've all been through these situations at some point, and if we haven't already, then we most probably will in the future. So try and learn these structures as best as you possibly can, and next time, rather than just telling people what to do, give them a nice story to explain it and show it in an imaginative and creative way. So, that's it for the 7 story structures. In the next module, we're going to be looking at body language, tone, and congruency. I'll see you there. Many thanks.